Hi, this is Prefekt. Today I'm going to break down my track called I See You, which was released last month. It sounds like this.
I need you. Stuck in a dream of you ain't got good. I see you. Yeah. I need you. Oh, I wish I could slow it down.
This track was a result of me realizing that I hadn't released anything for about 3 months because I was working on my album at the time. So I wrote this and produced it in 2 days. The reason I chose to break down this track is because it's fairly simple compared to my other tracks, and it's utilizing some really simple techniques, which I think you will be able to apply to your productions after this. So the lead in this track is actually really simple. It consists of 4 layers, the first one being a serum patch. Both oscillator A and B are set to saw waves. Oscillator B has got a unison of 6 and a tiny bit of detune. They're both going through a low pass filter with an envelope controlling the cutoff point. And it triggers with each note. For the effects, we got a flanger, a mono flanger. We've got OTT to exaggerate the overtones generated by the flanger, and another filter just to remove some of the harsh high end. Just a flanger. OTT. And filter. The lead has got 3 additional layers, which are all brass from Contact, but it was so CPU heavy I had to freeze the tracks. First one is a trumpet. It's really quiet. It plays a silly harmony, but it fills out the mix nicely. Second one is another trumpet, which just dubs the lead. And the third one is actually a copy of the second one, but with Alter Boy, which takes it up an octave. Also introduces some cool formants. All together, they sound like this. And with the lead. So the chords in this track consist of 2 layers. The first one is a piano. I use 88 Ensemble by Sonyvox. It's really good. It's got a high pass, quite a lot of compression, really fast settings, high ratio, and soft clipping, as usual. And it's got a utility that cuts off the tails. And I've raised the gain a bit just to remove some of the mid information. The second layer is a serum patch. It's very simple. It's just a Juno with a unison of 6 and a tiny bit of detune. By itself, it sounds like this. Both layers together. So for the bass, I use a plugin called Ample Bass. I'll link it in the description. It's really good and it's free. It's got Saturn to introduce some distortion in the mids, or rather saturation. Also some of the high end. And the bass line sounds really wonky by itself, but altogether it makes sense. It's got a high pass because this information will essentially be replaced by a sub anyways, and it's got compression with fast settings. So in terms of complexity, this track is really straightforward. This is what the fills sound like by themselves. Some of the samples are own made and some come from Splice. The only thing I have going on in MIDI right now is this electro bass, which I can show you real quick. I use this sound in like every single track. It's a saw wave, and it's going through a phaser. The phaser is set pre-distortion, so the distortion happens after the phaser. It doesn't have any like actual movement. I've just set a static frequency and the drive all the way up, and then I've got tube distortion, and I'm playing a bit with the filters, and you get this. Having distortion after a phaser makes it really fat. So the vocal for this track started out as a cymatic sample. It sounded like this at first.
I count down slowly. When I get to one, you're standing by my side.
I think you get the idea. It was very R&B. I chopped out a few individual parts.
I see you. I need you. Stuck in a dream of you ain't gone for good. Oh, I wish I could slow it down. Damn.
After I'd found the parts I liked, I consolidated them and put an alter boy on it. This takes it up an octave. The dry wet is about halfway through, so you still get like the original coming through.
I see you. I need you. Stuck in a dream of you ain't gone for good.
It's also sent to a plate reverb and a tape delay. After I was happy with the initial vocal, I sang some harmonies on it. This is what it sounds like by itself.
Oh, I wish I could slow it down.
And there's also more stuff, obviously, but you get the idea. I use a really good free auto-tuner by Auburn. Link in the description. Quite a high pass, compression, overdrive, and another alter boy, which also takes it up an octave. It's essentially the same settings as the lead vocal. OTT, obviously.
Oh, I wish I could slow it down.
It just introduces some cool high-end harmonics, and then another high pass because OTT and overdrive introduces some low-end information that I don't really want. I usually do my own guitar stuff, but for this song I was in kind of a rush, and I found this really cool sample, so I figured why not. This is what it sounded like initially. Yeah. So at first I used a high pass filter, removed some high end, compressed it, and then this really cool filter technique, which is a high pass filter with a sharp resonance and a tiny bit of LFO. It gives it a wah effect. The LFO obviously controlling the frequency of the filter. And I later chopped it up to match the progression of the rest of the track, and this is what it sounded like. There's not really a lot going on with the drums. I've got a ghost kick to control the sidechain. I got this fill snare, a hi-hat pattern, which consists of 3 different hi-hats, 2 closed ones and 1 open. Later in the drop, a shaker is introduced. It sounds like this. The sample is just on the offbeats, but I've got a simple delay with 16th notes, so it sounds like an actual person playing the shaker, almost. Got a clap, E5 snare. I kind of ruined the snare with compression because it distorts, but it works in the big picture. A tambourine. And I shamelessly just took some virtual riot percussion. I hope you enjoyed this brief overview of my track. Let me know in the comments if you want me to go more in depth, or if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.